Morning, Karen.
Sorry, I'm muted. How are you?
Hi, Karen. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm just going to go run and get my water,
Okay.
and then I'll be right back. So you can feel free to relax. Everything seem okay from what I sent you?
Oh, yeah. I have it all printed out and it's all looks great. Looks great, Karen. Yeah.
Well, good. Let's see. We have 35 registered. Sorry, I'm not looking at you. I'm just clicking on some things here.
Oh, that's great.
We have 35 people registered.
And do you know this is being recorded?
Yes, I set it up to be automatic recorded. So why don't I'm going to do two things. I'm going to make you a host.
Okay.
And I'm going to pause this.
Okay.
Yep, I'm able to record.
Okay, great. So there's the ticket.
Oh wait, now it's a cloud recording. This is interesting.
Well, we'll be recording the meeting too.
Anyway, oh, okay. So you can always share the file.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Then not a big deal. Then if you want, you can remove me as a host and I can just get the recording from you.
Okay. No need to burden you with extra duties this morning.
Karen, it does say now it's recording. Did you mean to do that?
No,
Okay.
no, we'll stop. Thank you. Thanks. Good morning, everyone. So nice to see many of your faces. Thank you for coming. While we're letting people into the waiting room, if you wouldn't mind, please go ahead and introduce yourself in our chat. And tell us what your connection is to Needham, please, whether it's I work here, I'm raising my family here, maybe both. Maybe you came to visit Needham for Cookie Monster. Whatever that connection is entirely fine. Great. Thank you. We still have a few more people trickling in. So nice to see you all. Hi, Madison. Great. We have Ashley from the Needham channel. Good morning, Denise Domnarski from Needham Public Schools. There's Alyssa. Hello, everybody. Good morning, Pierre. Nice to meet you. All righty. Hi, Freddie. Okay, we are going to give it just another moment. We have a couple last people trickling in. But again, welcome to the SPAN quarterly meeting. I'm Karen Shannon. And if you haven't yet, please, we welcome you to introduce yourself on our chat. Please tell us, if you will, what your connection to Needham is, whether it's you work here, you live, you're raising a family here, or both. We would love to meet you that way. Unfortunately, we won't have the opportunity to go around and introduce everybody one-on-one, but at least we can meet you through the chat. So thank you. Okie doke. All righty. Okay. Well, we'll get started now. I know maybe a few more folks will be joining us as we go along, but it's nice to see so many of you. Thank you for joining us on a Tuesday at 8:30 in the morning. Love to see all your faces. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Karen Shannon. I'm the Senior Substance Use Prevention Coordinator with the Needham Public Health Department, and I also oversee SPAN, the Substance Prevention Alliance of Needham. So welcome. I know that some of you are new to a SPAN meeting, so a quick word about what SPAN is. As I mentioned, we're the Substance Prevention Alliance of Needham, but what is that? We're a community coalition made up of members from all over the community, different sectors, with a common goal of enhancing the health and safety of our youth, particularly as it relates to helping them grow and develop to be substance-free. We provide education, awareness, using a data-driven approach to reduce the use of alcohol, marijuana, and other drugs among our Needham youth. And we meet quarterly as this large coalition. This is our fall meeting. We have them by the seasons, if you will. We'll have another in December, one in March, and then one to wrap up the year in May. And we also have parent, youth, and community action teams that meet more often. And that's where a lot of the planning and implementation of our prevention programs takes place. So for those of you who are here for the first time today to a coalition meeting, we welcome you. You are our stakeholders. You come as students, parents, school administrators, healthcare professionals, law enforcement, civic organizations, state and local government, just to name a few. So we welcome you, and please feel free to ask any questions, or if you're more comfortable just listening in, that's fine too. We're grateful today to have the Social Science Research and Evaluation Group for a presentation on the focus groups that we held earlier this spring, SSRE, which I will use as their acronym, facilitated those student and parent focus groups earlier this spring, as I mentioned, and in just a few minutes, we'll have them present some of the data on the insights that we gained from those focus groups. And then following the presentation, we'll have time for your feedback. That's when we really love to hear your questions, your input, your ideas, because your feedback today helps us in the next steps for supporting our youth and our families and the community at large. So we will also make a little time after the discussion to hear from two of our Needham High students who will be here to share about salsa. And you'll get a little information on that. And hopefully too, we'll have some time for a few quick SPAN updates. So thank you again for attending. We're very excited to hear from our colleagues at SSRE. Before I get started with their introductions, I just quickly want to introduce the team I work with. I think they're on my page, but Karen Mullen, Angie McDonald, and Monica DeWinter are all project coordinators with me in the Needham Public Health Department. And I'd also like to acknowledge Alyssa Kentz, who is our parent action team leader and steering committee member, and Deputy Police Chief Chris Baker. He is the community action team leader and steering committee member. Also, finally, a huge acknowledgement to all the steering committee members and the action team members. While we aren't able to introduce you all today one-on-one, please know that your commitment to SPAN is so deeply appreciated. And we'll have more time at our December meeting for you to meet those various members. Okay, so how are we doing? Everybody getting comfortable? Let's see, great. So I'm going to introduce now our presenters. Dr. Scott Fermika is a senior research scientist at the Social Science Research and Evaluation, Inc. in Burlington, Massachusetts. He has over 20 years of experience conducting basic and applied research and evaluation at the local, state, and federal levels on health and behavioral projects, with an emphasis on substance misuse prevention and harm reduction. He currently oversees the state cross-site evaluation of the prevention set-aside of the Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Block Grant in Massachusetts. He's the principal investigator for evaluation for SAMHSA's Suicide Prevention Resource Center and is a co-investigator on several public health and public safety collaboration post-overdose outreach initiatives supported by SAMHSA and the CDC. In addition to his work on substance misuse prevention, Dr. Fermika has worked on the evaluation of multiple large-scale training and technical assistance centers supported by SAMHSA, the U.S. Department of Education, and the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. Welcome, Dr. Fermika. We know you as Scott. If that's all right, we'll refer to you that way. Great. And I'd like to introduce Olivia Briggs. Olivia is a research associate also at Social Science Research and Evaluation, or SSRE. She's a current Master of Public Health candidate and has over 7 years experience in social science research at the state, local, and national level. And at SSRE, Olivia works on several evaluations of substance misuse prevention programs. Additionally, she's worked on the evaluation of multiple large-scale training and technical assistance centers supported by SAMHSA, the U.S. Department of Education, and the Mass Department of Public Health. So welcome, Olivia and Scott. At this time, I think what we'll do is turn the presentation over to you, and we will be attentively listening. And please, all of you, if you have a question, you're welcome to put that in the chat. We appreciate your staying muted during the presentation, and then afterwards we'll have an opportunity to go through your questions and perhaps even unmute people if you'd like to ask a question directly. Thank you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Karen, for that lovely introduction. So for the record, I did tell Karen she could have just introduced me as this is Scott. He does some research with us, and that would have been perfectly fine as well. I recognize many of your faces. I think, as some of you know, I have been working on and off with SPAN and with the Needham Health Department since 2011. I need to give a quick shout out. My good friend Carol Reed, who's also on the line, was the one who found us and brought us into Needham. So we've very much enjoyed working in the community for all these years. Today, what we wanted to focus on, as Karen mentioned, was it really is the selected findings from a series of focus groups that were conducted in the spring, both with Needham High School students and with parents and caregivers of Needham High School students. So I'm going to start off the presentation with a little bit of background, and then my colleague Olivia is going to present the bulk of the focus group data, and then I'll come in from time to time and sprinkle in some other data sources. So to begin, just to give you a little sense of what the focus group process entailed with some background and methods. As I mentioned, we did conduct focus groups with Needham High School students and with parents and caregivers. We conducted 3 focus groups, and the point of these groups really was to discuss health and well-being in general. But given SPAN's mission, there was a heavy emphasis on substance use and related issues and how SPAN and others can support youth to make good decisions about their health. The first series of focus groups was conducted in March 2021, and SPAN was responsible for convening these groups with collaboration from Needham Public Schools, specifically Needham High School. We ran 2 focus groups. They were conducted, and I think this is very important to mention as just context for the presentation. They were conducted when Needham High School was operating in hybrid mode due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So as many of you will recall, this was when the students were in school, I believe 2 days a week, and then remote for the rest of the time. So these groups were conducted while the students were still in hybrid mode. Both sessions, as a result, were conducted online over Zoom. So very similar to what we're doing this morning. We had the students, while they were participating in their remote health class, participate in these focus groups. We had 14 students across the groups of mixed gender, representing freshmen, so 9th graders, and juniors in the 11th grade. The rationale for this was we wanted to kind of bookend the school. So we knew that we couldn't really talk to everyone. So we wanted some of the kids representing that perspective of having just kind of come into high school, and those that were a little further along in their high school career. In April, very shortly thereafter, we conducted 1 focus group with parents and caregivers of Needham High School students. This focus group was conducted during the week, during a weekday evening, and similarly, it was facilitated over Zoom. We had 11 parents and caregivers, again, of a mixed gender, who had children in Needham High School spanning grades 9 through 12. And I just want to point out here at the bottom, just in the interest of space, rather than repeating parents and caregivers multiple times, I think we're probably just going to default and use parents, but that is inclusive, of course, of parents and caregivers, so it's broadly inclusive. The other data, the area that we really wanted to talk about were the focus group discussion areas. So as we go through, Olivia is going to be presenting data on a number of different topic areas that we asked about during the focus groups. We went into these groups with kind of what's referred to as semi-structured script. So we had, broad questions, what's it like living in Needham? And then we had some, prompts here and there if we, felt we needed to, kind of dive into to any of the questions in more depth. But this represents the basic outline or structure of the groups. We asked questions about just life in Needham, the benefits and challenges to living in Needham. We had a series of questions on health and well-being, things that both youth and parents feel impact the health of Needham High School students. We had a very robust section on substance use. We asked about substance use among Needham High School students, just to get a sense of what students and parents felt was going on at the school among school students. How youth obtain or get substances, where youth who choose to use are using substances. We asked several questions about youth posting online about substance use. This is a question that we only asked of students, so we did not ask parents, but we asked the youth, and we'll get into this in a little more depth, whether they see or whether they personally are posting online on social media about substance use. And finally, in this section, why youth use substances and things that promote youth use. So we really wanted to get their perspective on why they think some youth choose to use. Then we closed the discussion, really focusing on prevention. And this kind of goes back to that point I was raising before about really wanting to make some of this information actionable, both for Stan and for others who are interested in this area. So we asked why youth decide not to use substances. And again, we asked this only of students, but we said, for those youth who choose not to use, what is the rationale there? What is the reason for deciding not to use? We asked about attitudes and behaviors related to substance use that both youth and parents feel need to change in Needham, right, as opportunities for improvement. Things that Needham does well already. We know, and I think the students and the parents both know that Needham's already doing quite a bit in this space, right? So we wanted to know, what do the kids think is really working? What do the parents think is really working already? And then finally, we asked what else should be done to help prevent youth substance use within Needham. So these are the topic areas in the focus group that we'll be covering this morning. We will be pulling in from time to time some additional contextual data from a couple of different sources. As most of you likely know, Needham is a very data-rich community, as we like to call it. You do a lot of data collection, you have a lot of assessment data, there's a lot to work with. Now, I want to be clear about why we're introducing these data, right? So we're not introducing these data to prove a point, right? So we're not saying, oh, this is what the parents said, this is what the kids said. So, and here's proof, because in the youth health survey, this is what they also said. All we're trying to do here is to build confidence, right? So I think it's very easy to come along and say, well, you talk to 14 kids, you talk to 11 parents, and what do they know? Were they representative of the community, right? We pull in these additional data sources to just say, we're not trying to prove anything, but the parents said this, and this also popped up in the parent survey where we had 500 parents respond. The kids say this, and this kind of similar thing popped up in the youth health survey where we had 1,000 kids respond, right? So it's just intended to kind of support and build confidence in what we're going to be presenting for you today. To that end, we're pulling from 3 data sources, which I think many of you are likely familiar with. The first is the Metrowest Adolescent Health Survey, referred to by the acronym MWAHS. And this is a survey of youth health and wellness behaviors. It is conducted biennially, and it has been since 2006, and the most recent implementation was in 2018, prior to COVID. This survey is conducted with all Needham public school students in grades 6 through 12, so you have broad representation of the middle grades and the high school population. The second source we'll be pulling a little bit of data from is the Needham Parent Survey. This is an online survey about parent beliefs, perceptions, behaviors regarding underage drinking and youth substance use. This also has been conducted biennially. It started in 2011, and the most recent survey was in 2019, again, prior to COVID. And this is for parents of all Needham public school students in grades 6 through 12. So we have some data from that we're going to sprinkle in. And then finally, I think you're probably familiar with this group, but with the SALSA group, the Students Advocating Life Without Substance Abuse at the high school. The SALSA kids designed a survey specific around use of electronic vaping products, or vaping as we call it. And they conducted this survey with our assistants in June of 2019. And we conducted this survey online with Needham public school students in grades 8 through 11. So we have a little bit of data from that we want to kind of sprinkle in as well. So that just gives you an idea of what the territory we're going to cover today. We're going to primarily focus on the focus group data that Olivia is going to present, and then I'll present a few slides here and there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Olivia, and we'll start to get into some of the focus group data. So, Olivia? Olivia, can you hear us? I think we're having some audio issues. Bear with me for a moment, and if Olivia can't come online, I'll start off and she can join in. It looks like Olivia may need to reboot her computer. So I'll just start, and then Olivia, as soon as you're able to rejoin us, that would be fantastic. So as I mentioned before, we started off with the focus group, and we asked both students and parents to identify some of the benefits and challenges to living in Needham. And the way that we've organized these data, you'll see it presented in this slide, and then this is the format we'll be following throughout, is we have the thematic student responses on the left-hand side and the parent responses on the right. And we've chosen to kind of bullet these out and just to extract the broad themes from the discussion. We started off and asked a little bit about the benefits to living in Needham. And I think what we heard, and you'll see this on the slide, both from students and from parents, is just that it's a small and friendly community, right? It's a great place to live. They really emphasize this. I know on the parent caregiver side, they said, something that really attracted us to buy in Needham or to come to Needham was that it is kind of small and everyone's close together, and when you're out tending your yard or just walking around, you see all your neighbors, you see everyone, and feeling that it's safe for the kids to ride their bikes to their friend's house or walk to the downtown area. Both the students and parents talking about benefits also mentioned just the range of activities and the variety of things to do. The students emphasized all the things that they have access to within the public school system, the intramural sports, the extracurricular activities. The parents focused a little bit more just kind of on the rich cultural and social fabric of the community and opportunities to, you can get to Boston really easily. And there's so many lovely museums and other activities and things to do around the community. Parents also emphasized that they feel that Needham residents are very socially engaged. So they said, for example, there are a lot of Facebook groups and other social media groups that have very active participants, and people are really engaged in the community, and they're really, vocal about the things that they believe in. So that was seen as a benefit to living in Needham. They also felt in large part, parents and caregivers, that the community itself is very inclusive and open with regard to the residents and schools. So, feeling invited and feeling welcome. some of the challenges that were identified in living with Needham. So I'm going to focus on the student side first. Both students and parents both identified lack of diversity and exposure, both along economic and racial and ethnic lines. We're really saying that the way the kids described it was it's kind of like living in a bubble. And the way that the parents or caregivers described it is that they feel like in particular, the housing market is pricing out some families. So it's resulting in less diversity over time, and particularly those who've lived in the community for a long time. Both parents and students also identified feeling that one of the challenges to living in Needham was just the pressure and expectations on youth. Pressure to excel, pressure to fit in. So really focusing on that as something that they both highlighted as a challenge. Students, probably not surprisingly, identified lack of privacy in a small town. So they said, one of the challenges of living here is everyone knows everyone. So, and that could be positive or negative, but it's more difficult to maybe get away with things because I'm going to bump into someone who knows my parents, or everyone knows everyone, and it's a small town. On the parent side, some of the parents identified pressure on parents, and some really described feelings of isolation and or feeling inadequate. I think one participant in particular was, very eloquent in just saying that, I work and then I come home and I feel like I do all this, all these things for my child, and then I look next door at what they're doing with their child, and I feel like I'm not doing enough. So just that, some parents feeling somewhat of a sense of inadequacy to that end. I'm going to go to the next slide here.
Hey, Scott, can you hear me?
Oh, you're back. Perfect.
I'm
Thank
back.
you so much.
Quick restart and I'm back.
I'll turn it back over to you, but I'll pause very quickly to ask if I did a okay job on this slide and if you want to add anything.
You did great. Thank you. I
All right.
caught the back half of it.
Okay. I'll take it over.
All right. So we then asked broadly about, so we continue to ask parents and students about the things that impact the health and well-being of NHS students. And here we found parents and students both agree that social isolation due to the pandemic was a huge factor on the health and well-being. So not being in person for school 100% of the time, not having as much of a social life outside of school was a huge factor on the health and well-being reported by students and parents. Students also identified stress generally related to, being in high school, as well as screen time, which was especially, there was especially a lot of screen time now due to the pandemic with school being online. And like I said, less social time outside of school. Parents also noted some of the challenges living in Needham as significant impacts to youth health, being belongingness and fitting in, as well as the expectation and needing to excel, which we kind of talked about on the previous slide, the challenges to living in Needham.
So I'm going to hop back in here. And as I mentioned, we wanted to present a little contextual data along the way. What this slide is showing are data from the Metrowest Adolescent Health Survey, particularly data around stress among Needham High School students. As I mentioned before, these data were collected in 2018, so pre-pandemic, which I think is important to note. And you've probably seen some of these data before. But in that survey, there are a couple of questions about stress. And I think it's important to mention that we heard a lot in the focus groups about stress related to or as a result of obviously the COVID-19 pandemic. But stress was there before COVID-19. If anything, and I'm sure I see some people nodding, if anything, it exacerbated or exposed issues that had already been there for a while. So one of the questions in the Metrowest survey asked students to report the extent to which they feel their life is stressful. And this was based on a scale, right? So not at all stressful, a little stressful, somewhat stressful, very stressful. What we saw in 2018 was that a third of Needham high school students, 32%, reported that their life was very stressful in the past 30 days, right? So 1 of every 3 students, if you want to think of it that way. When the survey dug down a little bit deeper and asked about different sources of stress, what the kids said in 2018, and this again is representative of 9th graders up through 12th grade, 66% indicated that they worry or feel stressed about school issues, either often or very often in the course of their day. 30% indicated that they feel stressed or they worry about social issues. So fitting in with their peers, do they have the right clothes? Do they, are they doing the right things? Appearance issues, 25% of the kids. 23% of the kids identified physical or emotional health issues, 20% identifying family issues, and then only 5% identifying safety issues. So what we see in this slide, and I think the point we want to make is, we heard a lot about stress in the focus groups, and this is borne out, even prior to the pandemic in some of the data from the Metrowest survey. So stress is an issue, but stress was an issue. And so with that, I'm going to advance to the next slide and turn it back to Olivia.
Okay. So then we asked broadly about the substances being used among NHS students. And overall, what was brought up most was alcohol, vaping, and marijuana, which I'm sure we're not completely surprised about, but those are the big themes. Students say that alcohol is pretty normalized. It's something that's been going on for a while, and they didn't identify it as a big deal because it's so normalized and used most often, but mostly in groups and at parties. So for the most part, students aren't using alcohol on their own. Vaping was interesting because students noted that it is the most convenient, and some kids are really addicted to vaping, but they're also noting that it might be losing its popularity, and parents were also agreeing with that as well. And then for marijuana, it was just broadly identified as something that was really popular. We heard that Needham has a little nickname as Weedum, so it's something that they identified as something being very popular and also used in group settings as well.
Great. And we're going to pause here very quickly and pull up, again, data from the 2018 Metrowest Adolescent Health Survey. And this is showing among Needham High School students which substances students reported using in the past 30 days. And we call this current use of different substances. So similar to what we just saw in the focus group findings, the most popular substance is alcohol. So when we ask, all the kids in Needham High School, what substances have you used in the past 30 days, alcohol comes out at top, 29%, which we see everywhere. We see it in other communities in Massachusetts, state as a whole, the nation as a whole. This is followed in 2018 by electronic vapor products, or again, vaping as we call it. 23% reported vaping in the past 30 days. Followed by marijuana use at 20%, and then cigarettes at 2%. Now, Olivia started to mention a little bit about vaping, which we had a lot of discussion about with Karen and with the other folks at SPAN. I think something to point out is that this survey, the Metrowest survey in 2018, was conducted prior to both COVID and prior to the crackdown on the vaping industry, right? The vaping survey that the Salsa group did in June 2019, again, was conducted before the crackdown on the vaping industry and before, as I'm sure many of you are familiar with the term, before kind of the eval scare that came out of the CDC, where we were seeing all these media reports and all these instances of people getting very sick from vaping. So I suspect, as do many of us, that when this survey goes off again, you will probably see the vaping numbers plummet. And I think we heard a little bit of that in the focus group, in that when we look at the kids who were in middle school during, kind of the height of the vaping crisis, if you will, right? What we heard them saying is that, now that we're in high school, we have a lot of friends who, for lack of a better term, we feel are addicted to nicotine at this point. if you talk to the kids that were a little bit younger who weren't quite at that point when the crackdown in the industry occurred, they're the ones who started to say, so like the younger kids are saying, vaping used to be cool. I'm not sure if it's that cool anymore. So that, that's kind of some of the nuance that we're seeing in those data, as it's almost like a cohort effect, which we just wanted to point out as well. All right. Olivia?
Okay. So we talked about what substances youth are using. Then we moved on to discuss with both parents and students about how youth acquire those substances. So the biggest theme that came out was youth are getting substances, alcohol from home, and parents agreed with that. And they also noted that they think that kids are also now, especially with marijuana being legalized, are also taking edibles from home that parents have, as well as parents providing alcohol to kids knowingly versus unknowingly. Other sources that came up on both sides, parents and students, were that older friends or family members are buying alcohol, and parents noted marijuana as well for younger and high school students. And then students also brought up, interestingly, that social media is often used to advertise who has vapes, and as a connection for those people to purchase vapes. And parents also noted that some online retailers exist that youth can purchase vaping products from. Students did mention briefly that some kids have and use fake IDs to purchase alcohol, but this was definitely something they said was less common, and taking alcohol and from the home or purchasing it through an older friend or family member was much more common.
And we wanted to, again, pop in and show you a little bit of data from the Metrowest survey related to access to alcohol and marijuana among Needham High School students who used in the past 30 days. So there are 2 questions in this survey, and they asked if you used alcohol in the past 30 days, or if you used marijuana in the past 30 days, right? How did you obtain that? And respondents could, or the students could select multiple options here. And we've listed the top 5. So when we look at alcohol and we say, well, if you drank, how did you get it? 66% indicated that they got it at a party. 45% indicated that they got it from a friend's, not at a party. 27% said someone 21 or older gave it to them or purchased it for them. 23% said they took it from home, or they got it from home rather, with the knowledge of their parent, and 5% indicated that they took it from home without knowledge of their parent. And so this kind of, as you reflect back on what Olivia just presented, this sort of lines up with what we heard the youth and the parents talking about in those groups. On the marijuana side, very similar, if they use marijuana in the past 30 days, where did they get it? 71% said from a friend's, not at a party. 52%, over half, said that they bought it from someone. 45% indicated that they got it at a party, and then so on. So we are seeing, some kind of consistency here just around where youth are obtaining the substances when they choose to use them.
Okay, so then we went on to look at where youth are using substances, as well as some themes about posting online about substance uses. So again, like in the previous section, homes was one of the biggest themes that came up about where youth are using substances. Parents and students both identified house parties as a common location. And students noted that sometimes parents were home for these, but very often they were away when these were occurring. However, house parties, of course, with the COVID-19 pandemic, were not happening as much over the past year and a half. But that was a common thing to be happening before. And then additionally, students said that sometimes youth will gather at homes in smaller groups because it's less suspicious to parents, and parents are less likely to think that substance use is occurring if they're in smaller groups of friends, maybe hanging out in the basement was brought up. And parents are less likely to check in or have questions about those types of gatherings. Parents also note that there is drinking occurring at football games, and students say that their peers are using wherever they're hanging out, especially when we're thinking about vaping, where I said earlier, it's kind of a substance of convenience and can be easily brought anywhere. And then students also brought up an interesting topic of posting online about using alcohol specifically. They said that they're often posting to Instagram and Snapchat using the private stories feature, where you can pick and choose who is seeing those stories. And they're posting about, drinking in groups and in parties, but they're actually covering up the cups, the cans, the bottles with emojis and other things to block the substance from being in the photo. And they said that they were doing this mainly out of fear of getting in trouble, and also cited some social media literacy education that they had received that kind of taught them that that's best practice.
I want to pull in a little data from the parent caregiver survey now that was conducted in 2019. And this asks parents and caregivers to report on the frequency of calling other parents. So we asked them, how often do you call other parents to make sure that they will be home before you allow your child to go to their house for a social gathering? And here in this slide, you see that there's an enormous amount of variation in the extent to which parents are kind of calling. If their child is going to their friend's house, just calling beforehand saying, hey, my child's going over to your child's house this weekend. Are you guys going to be home, or are you down on the Cape, or are you in Boston for the evening? Just to see if anyone will actually be there. So when we talk about just kind of that checking in and monitoring and how much use presumably is occurring in homes, we see a lot of variation in the extent to which parents or caregivers are kind of making the call, as we say it. So that's just a data point we wanted to kind of pull in as well.
So then we were also interested in learning more about the reasons youth use substances and some possible factors that promote substance use. Students are saying that it's mostly a personal choice, and peer pressure isn't really playing a huge factor in that decision making, though substance use is often a common factor of different peer groups. So youth tend to make their peer groups around that common factor. But they're saying that peer pressure is not a huge factor. Some students and parents think that there are youth that are using substance to escape from reality and to use it as self-medication. And others are doing it to have fun and be social. So there's some mixed feelings around that. And parents were concerned with the mixed messages that have come from the legalization of marijuana and how that's possibly affected the promotion of marijuana use among youth. So then we also wanted to get a sense for the factors that lead students to decide not to use, as opposed to why they're using, but why some people are not using. And only students were asked about this topic. So the largest thing that came up was fear of consequences from a number of different entities, being school sports. So from coaches, getting benched for games or kicked off a team, school consequences, so suspensions, detentions, family consequences, like getting grounded or getting in trouble with parents, and then reputational consequences, fear for how that is going to look with peers. Students also noted that some youth have concerns about how substances affect their health, and specifically how that could maybe affect sports performance and the ability to perform at the highest level.
And we saw a little bit of this in the SALSA vaping survey. So in the vaping survey that we helped the SALSA kids implement, we asked kids about decisions about whether or not to vape, and what kind of drove their decisions about whether or not to vape back in 2019. And we saw a lot of the same themes. So we saw 84% saying, you know what, I choose not to vape because I'm concerned about health effects. 78% said I choose not to vape because of potential school penalties. I could get in trouble. Parent opinions, or 73%. MIAA, which is the Massachusetts Interscholastic Athletic Association. So penalties or sanctions for kids who use sports and are caught using substances, 68% cited that as a major driver or concern. And then, as we saw, we kind of with the reputation, friends' opinions, 42%.
So we asked parents and students what they thought were attitudes, behaviors, and sort of norms that need to change in Needham. And both parents and students are in agreement that communication about substance use needs to be better. Both parents talking with their kids about substance use and their expectations for their child, as well as parents communicating with one another, which we saw a little bit previously. Scott showed that data related to parents calling one another. Both parents and students agree that overall communication could be better in Needham. Students are also concerned with the youth that have become addicted to nicotine use, predominantly through vaping, as we saw. And Scott mentioned some of the youth that were kind of in the height of the vaping pandemic and now are pretty addicted to nicotine. Parents believe there should be more consistency and balance in the consequences, as well as more accountability for those parents who are allowing or hosting parties in their home, which we saw was parents thought was, sometimes parents are allowing these parties to happen knowingly, well, sometimes unknowingly, but they believe there should be some more consequences and accountability for those parents who are doing this knowingly.
So we hear a lot about parent-child communication. I think a valid question is, are conversations happening, right? Because we hear so much about communication. And yes, the conversations are absolutely happening. So if we look at the parent survey and we ask the parents or caregivers, have they ever talked to their child about their family's alcohol or other drug guidelines? 93% of parents and caregivers say, yes, we have talked to our child about our AOD guidelines. Talked about different substances, about vaping. 69% of parents in 2019 said that they had talked to their child about vaping or Juul in the past 30 days, about tobacco use. If we look over to the right here, this is the statistic that we also wanted to highlight, that 35% of parents strongly agree that they can have an influence on whether their child uses alcohol or drugs. And we want to point out, and you'll see in the subtext, 57% agree with that statement. So 92% of parents say, yes, I think we can have an influence. But we see this also as an opportunity for improvement in that, again, it's a little over a third are saying, yes, I really strongly agree here. I was reflecting on this a little bit this morning, and I'm sure many of you can kind of relate. I do this for a living, and I've had these discussions with my 8th grader, and they kind of go along the lines of, I'm driving in the car and I'll say, your mother asked me to talk to you about, and my son will stop me immediately and say, yes, I know all about sex and drugs, we're good. And then for me, it's like, okay, my higher brain function goes away, and rather than using that as an opportunity, I say, perfect, we've had the talk. So in any event, those are potential opportunities for additional intervention as we look a little bit further in this.
So of course, there are things that Needham is already doing well, as you know, and we ask students about their perceptions of what Needham does well. And we've talked about salsa already, but students knew about salsa and agreed that it had a positive impact in high school. Students also believe that the school is doing a good job of encouraging students who have issues with substance use to get help. And some students thought that the efforts in middle school to reduce vaping were effective, although there were some mixed messages on this, and some people thought that those messages were a bit too fear-based. Students were also very positive about the strong designated driver norm in Needham and felt that most students were very serious about this. They thought this was something that Needham was much better about than their peers in surrounding towns. When talking with friends that lived in other towns, they felt that Needham was doing a better job of this, and this was a very strong norm that Needham had. And then there's room for improvement, of course. So we asked parents and students about these opportunities for growth. Students agreed that there should be more widely advertised and enforced consequences, so students know exactly what consequences are for different types of infractions. And right now, that's possibly not widely known information or not consistently enforced. Parents expressed a desire to have more communication and information about important topics like securing alcohol and prescription drugs at home, social host liability, marijuana legality and its implications, and tips for communicating about substance use with their kids. They hope for continuing reminders about these topics through resources like school communications and the Needham Times. Parents also brought up a need for additional supports and confidential help for youth, as well as support for building youth coping and decision-making skills. And finally, parents also expressed a desire for more opportunities for activities. So at the very beginning, we mentioned that the number of activities in Needham was kind of a plus in the community, but they also identified this as an area for growth to have more activities beyond the very competitive options already offered at the school, like varsity sports. And that's all we have as far as presentation for today. So I think I'm going to kick it back to Karen before we open up for discussion. And thank you so much for taking the time to listen.
Thank you both. That was terrific. Let me just do a quick little adjustment here. There we go, Scott. I want to thank you both for all of those insights and for weaving in such rich context with those different surveys that Needham is very fortunate to have. I am taking a look at our time right now, and I know that we have 2 high school students who would like to share some updates about what the great work they're doing up at the high school. But before we do that, I'd like to just share a question for you that we're going to put up here on the screen. This will sort of get our discussion started. I think what we'll do, even though this is a little clunky, our students have to leave by 9:30. Our meeting runs until 9:45. I want to make sure that we all get a chance to listen to them. So in a minute, I'll turn the stage over to them. But before we do, we want to share a question for you on something called a Mentimeter. And I know Angie's going to be putting that up in just a moment. Is it up there now? And I always do this with my other screen. Is it up there, Angie?
The question's in the chat. I'm just going to get it up 1 second.
Oh, okay, great. What we'd like you to do is type in a response to the prompt of, as stakeholders and having heard this presentation today, what concerns the data has raised for you? So what concerns the data has raised for you? And you are welcome to add if there are things that you think that we are.
You can just use your
currently
phone
doing.
to scan that QR
Thank you.
code or go right to menti.com and type in that code right there and answer the question, and it'll pop up right on the screen here.
If anybody needs any more assistance with that, so it's www.menti.com with this code. And I think, can we put that code in the
Yep.
chat too, just so people can see it handy? Thanks, Angie.
1 second, I just gotta switch my screen.
No worries.
Sorry.
So please share with us what concerns you have around the data that you've just heard, what concerns it raises for you, and let us know if there are things that we should be doing or things that we are doing that need to be modified, or are there things that we aren't currently doing that we should be thinking about doing? Okay, so I'll give you all just a moment for that. And while you're focused on that, I'm going to introduce two students. Madison Boudreau and Bo-Young Paik are both at Needham High School, and they are leaders at SALSA, Students Advocating Life Without Substance Abuse. And we're going to give them just a quick minute to present.
Hi everyone, I'm Madison. I'm a junior at Needham High School and I'm one of the SALSA leaders. I just wanted to talk about a few of the things we've been doing so far this year. So far, we've had our first meeting of the year, which was great. We had a great turnout. We had about 75 students come and many of them were new students. On Saturday, we also had our new member training and there were about 30 students who came. We also, with thanks to an invitation from SPAN, we had two members, Athena 2 and Devin Schwartz, who had the opportunity to speak at the Needham High School coaches meeting about the importance of setting high standards for athletes. They're both members of SALSA and they're on the high school girls varsity volleyball team. So we have about 7 action teams, including vaping awareness, mental health awareness, distracted driving awareness, middle school wellness team, general campaigns, social media, and prevention connections. So we break off in these action teams to focus on different topics. So for the most part, we have leaders at the head of these meetings. For example, I lead the social media action team with another leader named Izzy. And we also have a few members who lead the action teams based on what they were the most interested in talking about. So I'd like to pass it on to Bo-Young because I know she wants to talk about her experience as a member and her work with the 84 movement.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me. My name is Bo-Young. I'm a sophomore at the high school and I'm a leader for the Vaping Awareness Action Team. And I just wanted to make a comment on that because a lot of people signed up for it, and that just like indicates like how much of an issue vaping still is. And I know in the data in the slides previous, there was a comment about how like kids think like vaping like isn't cool anymore. I did say this in like the Mentimeter thing, but I like from my perspective, I feel like it's just like vaping just more normalized, and like assuming that like because kids think vaping's not cool, like the number has decreased. I feel like that's untrue in my opinion, because I do think from what I'm seeing among students, the numbers like have gone up. I might be wrong, but like that's just what I'm seeing personally. But moving on from that, I am on the statewide leadership team for the 84 movement, which is a statewide movement of young youth fighting tobacco in Massachusetts. And the number 84 represents the percentage of Massachusetts youth who did not smoke when the movement began, but the number is up to 93.4% of youth who do not smoke. And that does not include vaping. And basically what we do is we educate peers and adults about tobacco and vaping industries, marketing tactics. And we also help create change locally and statewide to reduce the influence of tobacco in their communities. And we also do a lot of surveys among youth and adults about their perceptions of the prices and availability of other tobacco products. And we just promote social norms, messaging around youth tobacco use. So basically what we do is we meet on the statewide leadership team every week on Tuesday nights actually. And we get together and we plan events and like debrief about events and just like talk about issues and just like plan events and like workshops. I know I already said that, but it's just we consistently have workshops that I attended last year when I wasn't on the SLT. And it's just like a great environment because you get to like contribute your like thoughts and like also hear other people's thoughts from students like around the state. So it's not just in the local community. You get to reach out and like work with people from other parts of the state, which I think is really cool. And yeah, that's basically it.
I just
Thank you.
wanted
Oh, sorry, Madison, go ahead.
Sorry. I just wanted to add that I completely agree with Bo-Young, and she made a great point about vaping being normalized, and maybe that's why there's a decreased concern necessarily for it. And I think that was a really great point that she made. We also wanted to add that we're looking forward to making a difference locally and on the state level with our work, as we've created a connection with Representative Denise Garlick, and we hope to continue that relationship, as we hope that she stops by at our prescription drug take back day event through SPAN that's coming up. And yeah, we just wanted to say that we're happy to answer any questions that any of you have now or in the future about what we do and our focuses and what we're interested in. So thank you for letting us participate.
Thank you both. Really appreciate you made the time. If you'll notice, everybody, they're in school. They've taken time out of their schedule to join us this morning, which counts for a lot. I'm really touched by that. And we want to make sure that we make enough time for the youth voice to come through at everything we do. So thank you, Madison and Bo Young. It was great to have you. I know you've got a dash for class in a second. And if there are questions that come up afterwards, I'll make sure that we channel those back to you through Karen Mullen, who is our SALSA liaison. So thank you both and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. All righty. So thank you, everybody, for your attention on that. And what I'd like to do now with the time we have remaining is to take a quick look at the results of our Mentimeter. Is it possible, Angie, for us to share that? And then for those who have other questions and want to continue this discussion, we have some time for that now. All right, so taking a look, what I like about this is that we can see everybody's comments, and we will be saving these so we can bring them back to the action teams. I see a lot of comments about stress. Level of stress reported. Worry about the level of stress our kids carry every day. What can we do as a community to help alleviate that? Creating new opportunities for kids that are non-school related. Angie, would you mind just scrolling back up? Thank you. Yes, so would anybody like to unmute? You're welcome to do that since we've had you sitting so quietly. You can just put a little raised hand up there and we can you can unmute. Anybody want to add anything? Let's check over here. Okay.
Hey, Karen,
Yes.
it's Fred. I put the note about having other activities for kids to participate in. And while that's not obviously going to quell everything, but I just remember, you know, a few years back, Parks and Rec used to run like the TGI Fridays. And granted, like this is all outside of the pandemic issues that were, you know, obviously we can't have large groups and what have you, but I just remember thinking that's such a fantastic program to give kids some place to go where they're not trying to figure out like where they're going to hang out and why don't we just all go to the high school and break glass all over the field or whatever, you know, like, but let's give them something constructive to do for an extended period of time on a Friday night or whenever, really. I think those are the kinds of things that I think bringing those sorts of things back would be really, really useful and helpful. And then when you have enough of those throughout the year, one, it just gives them stuff to do, but also it gives them ideas of things that they could then plan on their own. And I think that's one thing I find with my kids is they're like, I have no idea what to plan because I don't know. I mean, one, they also don't think that hard, but whatever. Like, I think it might inspire them to then be like, you know, that activity that I did through Parks and Rec was really fun. Maybe we can get a small group together and go do that just on our own, that kind of thing.
Great.
Anyway.
Thank you, Fred. I appreciate that very much. I think that we have, over the period of years, had a focus on providing substance-free alternatives for students so that there is something they can do together in groups that's substance-free, pro-social substance-free. Some of you might be familiar with the 5th quarter events that we had been hosting for many years up at the high school. It's only really just recently that we've had that in hiatus. We can actually talk about that at one of our next coalition meetings, because there was a lot of discussion that we tried to generate through high school, informal high school feedback about that and the appeal of that or not. But thank you, Fred. I appreciate that very much. Okay, Sandra, I see you have your hand raised. And then we'll get to you,
Yes.
Stacy. Yes, thanks.
Hi. So my experience with kids, I mean, it's through plugged in musicians and different kinds of kids. It's really about the pressure and stress to be perfect. And I think it's important to, show kids about the importance of achievement and accomplishment and having, goals. And I think that's important to continue that. I also think it's important to show other aspects of, like, quote unquote success. I think that, not everyone fits into that hierarchical model of, achievement and all that. And I think that, the kids who may not see themselves either in that model or that path or sort of highlighted in the town, they may have other gifts and other ways of accomplishing, other ways of being special. But if they don't see themselves, kind of acknowledged and represented in the town, or they don't see maybe the type of success that they see themselves having, then the tendency I see is to disengage and to kind of have a decrease in self-esteem. And when I think those are two number one causes of addiction, of gravitating towards substance, is when you feel sort of hopeless, or you don't feel engaged, you don't feel acknowledged, you don't see a path to success. And, I think, it's hard because we want our kids to have success and be great, but how do we do that in a way that also gives them an opportunity to be human? And, especially at this age, and to have the time to figure out who they are inside, what are their gifts, and not have to constantly be something that they may not be, or that they don't feel that they can be, if that makes any sense.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for sharing that. Your words are very powerful. I appreciate all of that. And I think that I'm probably not alone, that it probably resonates with many other people as well in this room. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Stacy, I see you have your hand up.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Stacy. I am the Park and Recreation Director. I'm new. I've been here like 1.5 years, but I keep saying new because it's been COVID for all that time. So, Freddie, I love that you put that out there. We are actually bringing back our early release day events for everybody in K-12. So those will start up. We did not do the first one, much to our chagrin, because it ended up being quite a crazy madness over at Memorial Field. But we are bringing those back, and then we will be also bringing back Kids Night Out for the younger guys, and then TGI Fridays. So we are working for that. I'm gonna put my email in the chat, because any ideas, I'm welcome to all of them. I'd love for you guys to reach out to me. And Sandra, one of the things that we fight, or I shouldn't say fight with, but we struggle with at home with my 15-year-old is I'm daily encouraging them to hang out with their friends. Like I'm trying to get them to reach out to their own friends and do stuff on the weekends. And they're just like, I don't know what to do. Or what if they don't want to hang out with me? Like there's so much anxiety about reaching out to their own peers, that the more opportunities we can create where, like, oh, this sounds pretty fun, maybe I'll go, I agree, will hopefully snowball into them doing more on their own. It sometimes baffles me that I'm arguing with a 15-year-old to, like, not hang out at home. Like please go anywhere outside or bring friends over, whatever you want. So it's an interesting turn. I was like, see you later, Mom, when it was my turn to be in high school. But I think there's a lot of anxiety out there about just reaching out to their own friends that they see every day. So I think that's a great point. And, we're working on it. Anybody has any ideas, we are all ears. So thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. I appreciate your comment too about that anxiety. I wonder if people have thoughts on that, if it's more recently COVID induced or if it's a general trend that people are seeing, but thank you. Janet, yes.
Yes, I just wanted to respond to Stacy for one thing. Are they spending much more time on screen time? Is that why they don't want to go out and see their friends, do you think?
For my personal child, it's much more anxiety laden. More like if I reach out and they say no, or if they reach out and they say yes, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna talk about? I do think screen time plays a part. Just from my own personal experience, it's much more anxiety ridden.
So thank you. I also want to respond to Sandra because I think she brought up some absolutely fantastic points. I had the pleasure of running into Sandra in person for the very first time at the Harvest Fair on Sunday, and we had a lovely conversation. It was really very special, and I think she brings up some absolutely fabulous points in terms of the difference in kids and the ones that we're missing. Because it is those who think differently that are going to put us forward in a lot of different ways. And if you keep thinking like everybody else, you keep thinking like everybody else. It's encouraging that difference, to respect it, to listen to it, and to applaud it. It's not an easy task because we are such social beings that like to be like our peers, we think, but it's when you strike out from that path that you actually make strides forward. So I think I totally support what Sandra is saying, and she is doing a wonderful job with the plugged in, but I'm sure there are other kids with other talents that would be lovely if we could direct. I don't know exactly how you do that. The one thing that I missed when, let's see, Madison was telling about the action groups, I wondered if there was anything particularly that they could advocate for in terms of helping those who want to think a little differently. They don't want to use substances. The other thing that I was particularly concerned about is the motive for not doing substances seems to be punishment. The consequences, that's what everybody's asking. What are the consequences? And that actually I found very disappointing. I would be much happier if their predominant reason for not using was so that they'd preserve their brains. So, as a neurologist, I'm sorry, I am biased toward that. But it's how do we get that message across? It's not who's going to penalize you. What are you doing to your brain with these substances? And that for me is the message to get out there. So I've taken up enough time.
Thank you. Thank you, Janet, as always. Appreciate your thoughtful comments. Okay, I'm just looking at our time here, and I see that we are just about 3 minutes shy of our wrap up. Is there anybody else who wanted to share anything, any comments? Okay. So how do we move forward? That's the big question, right? We have all of this rich data and these insights from the focus groups. What I will put out to all of you is don't leave us just here. We'd love you to come back. We have action teams where we will bring some of the more in deeper dives, if you will, into the conversation, where we can talk about some of the feedback that we've heard today and some of the comments from you. Now that we have them in the Mentimeter and some of the comments that you've given us live here. So we would be more than happy to welcome you to any of our tables, whether it's at an action team or at even a coffee. We'll come to you if you'd like to have another conversation. But we would really appreciate anybody who would like to follow up with us and stay in touch and maybe work. And I know the commitment for time is always the challenge. But it doesn't have to be in large chunks of time. It can be small, broken down segments if that makes it easier. We like to make it whatever is easiest for everybody. But certainly when we talk about the aspects around access to substances, why kids use, where they use them, and then the perceptions of use and the attitudes, the community norms. I heard a lot around the norming of alcohol and marijuana use. These are all things that we can discuss more deeply in our action teams and see where we can use some intervening variables to help create programs to address them. So I know we're out of time. We'd love you to do our survey. Angie has put a link to our Survey Monkey in the chat. We'll also send that to you in our follow-up, but we would love to have your feedback. There it is, surveymonkey.com. And what else am I missing? We had some updates that we wanted to share with you. We can send them to you as well in our follow-up. But I really just wanted to give the opportunity to anybody else who might want to add anything. Carol Reed, I want to thank you. I didn't acknowledge you properly in the beginning. Carol Reed is really the founding preventionist in the public health department. She has been here for 11, 12 years, steadfast in her work towards substance use prevention. And in fact, has just received a Mass Call 3 grant, a block grant with Needham, Dedham, Westwood, and Walpole. Thank you. That will be focused on multi-substances over the next few years. And we also have a STOP Act grant that the federal government has given us through SAMHSA. It's a 4-year grant that will be focusing on underage drinking. So we have lots of new opportunities for us to pursue prevention in Needham. We're very excited about it. Please come to our table. Please give us a call. Reach out in any way that you like. We're all ears. We are yours to listen to. We're here to serve the community. So thank you.
Karen,
yes.
sorry to interrupt you. There was a comment in the chat you may want to address or just maybe read to the group.
Yes, thank you. Great. Learning about the impact of addiction and substance misuse on brain development is of interest. I wonder if students and parents would be interested in this approach to learn about the health and the issue of misuse. Thank you, Catherine. Would anybody like to comment about that? I, of course, have things I can add, but I just want to give that opportunity.
I'm always for that. I'm always for sharing my knowledge.
Absolutely. In fact, earlier this year in March, we had a webinar with a speaker, Dr. Safdar Medina, who came and did a presentation on cannabis and the impact on the teen brain. So that is definitely at the forefront of our minds in terms of providing education to parents in the community around the impact of substances on the teen brain. Absolutely. Thank you.
So Karen, on that, I'm pretty sure that was recorded, right?
Correct.
So it maybe somebody was asking for resources. So if we could have an ongoing list of resources of what's available, for example, that nice talk.
Absolutely. So all of our recorded presentations are on our SPAN website. Angie just put the link for that in the chat, www.spanneedham.org/events. You can click on those at your leisure, but that cannabis presentation is there as well as several others that we've done more recently, including the tipping point. We had some speakers earlier this spring to talk about when substance use among youth tips into addiction. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate your joining us this morning. And if I could just give one quick plug, we have the Take Back Day coming up on Saturday, October 23rd. We partner with the Needham Police Department, and we have salsa students who come to volunteer. It's a Take Back Day of unused or expired medications in the home as a safe disposal. It helps limit access and misuse of these medications. So we encourage you to spread the word on that. We'll put the flyer. It's actually on our website as well. If you go back to www.spanneedham.com. And our next meeting for the coalition will be Tuesday, December 14th, if you'd like to mark your calendars at the same time. So great. And please, if you would, just take a quick minute to do the survey. We'd be grateful for that. Alrighty. Monica, Angie, Karen, have I missed anything? Okay, wonderful. Sorry we ran a couple minutes over there, but thank you all. We really appreciate your time. Great to see you.